Good evening, all. Thank you for joining me. We're going to start tonight a little bit left of field because when I was looking over the actually a title that I gave to one of the earlier shurim in this series, probably for the sake of sensationalism, I admit, I put in the title of one of it was around about Hanukkah, a little bit earlier in the series. I mentioned about why the Stipler quoted Kant, and I never got to doing that, and I think it actually fits into one of the things we want to try and do this evening. So I'm going to start off and just mention a concept. Now, I am no expert in this concept at all. I've dabbled a little. It's a branch of philosophy known as epistemology, and what it means is it is our capacity or ability. It's the philosophy of knowledge. When we say that we know something, what does that mean? When we say we know something, and how can we ever be say to know something, to have true objective knowledge of a concept or an object as it really is? Is that even feasible? Is that even possible? And that's kind of the backdrop. It doesn't interest us in a direct sense, but I have to set the scene because this is actually quite relevant for what I believe the Ramchal is trying to achieve in towards the end of this perek, with these 6 postulates, these 6 ikorim, these 6 fundamental concepts of that which every Jew must, in the view of the Ramchal, must know about Hashem. And what does that mean about knowing? How can we ever, to what extent can we ever know Hashem? What does all this mean? So it is actually relevant. And therefore, I'm going to quote the Stipler. For those of you that I didn't, I do have some Makoros, which I'll bring up on the screen a little bit later, screen share, but this was a late edition, so I didn't, maybe I'll add it to the notes when I put up the link. Usually I put it up onto YouTube, and I will put a link to the Google Drive, which will contain the notes, Bli Neder. But so for those of you that might want it, it's a Chaye Odom, at the Perek Chov Daled. I think he has a second chelik as well. Chelik Aleph, Perek Chov Daled, chapter 24. And the chapter is entitled B'mufle Mimcha Al Tidrosh. And in Mirz Hashem, hopefully we will get back to this concept. B'mufle Mimcha Al Tidrosh means that which is of necessity obscured and hidden from you. In other words, that which you are unable to discern, to appreciate, to understand, Al Tidrosh, do not seek to understand it, because at best you will waste your time, and at worst you will arrive at erroneous conclusions. It's a pasuk, b'mufle mimcha al tidrosh. And this is the chapter title that the Stipler gives to this. And as I said, later we'll see a quote from the Ramchal in Das Tvunos, which is very important for us in this concept. He says as follows, and he uses this as an example. I read and translate very briefly. Hinei, harbe meos bashonim. He says, for hundreds of years, says the Stipler, nismachu alfei revavos hachokrim v'hama'ainim. Many philosophers and analysts relied al divrei Aristo v'Yesodosov, on the fundamental concepts of Aristotle, his cosmology, his ability to say that man can know certain things objectively. He was relied on to the point that you couldn't doubt him. V'huskam, it was agreed, it was assumed, and indeed the Rambam himself writes this in Moreh Nevuchim. And he goes along with Aristotle, as he says himself, anything that is tachas agalgal, anything that is within the physical universe, he's happy to rely on him on that. Until, says the Stipler, and this is true, by the way, this is of course a pattern in science also. Sir Karl Popper was famously said, philosopher of science, he said that something is true in science as long as we can make an assumption and do an empirical observation and draw the same conclusion. Until that point in time, until, you might come along with some Jew with a weird hairdo who'll come along and start telling you all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and everybody will say he's crazy. Until then, that becomes the science of the day. And to this day, still trying to work out how general relativity and quantum theory can work together, and apparently they can't. But it's only as good as we keep getting it. And then there is always, things are overthrown, many things are overthrown. And this is the point he is trying to make, actually. Says the Steipler, until 180 years ago or so, until somebody a Chochem got up in the city of Königsberg, and this, of course, is Immanuel Kant, V'sosar kol divrei Aristo, and he demolished the words of Aristo. Usha kol chachmei philosophim lefonov. Horas ad hayesod. He destroyed, this is the Steipler's understanding of it. He destroyed their concepts. And from that moment on, he says he's using this as an example of ideas and concepts which go unquestioned for centuries, maybe even for millennia, and then they get overturned. And there is always hostility, and this is true still today in the scientific world. That's not the point of tonight's lecture. There's a lot of interesting stuff around that. Imagine, I always think to myself, imagine, you would have lived in the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century. And as a Frum Yid, you would have maintained that the world has a beginning and the world was created. You would have been laughed out of school, out of university. You would have been the idiot. And then, like I said, along came, a Jew with a bad hairdo, together with a couple of others, maybe Hubble and Vesto Slipher and a couple of others, until it becomes clear that, steady state theory doesn't hold water anymore. It had a beginning. There was a beginning. So this is the concept that he's trying to, that the Steipler is trying to mention. For us, this is important. Why is this important for us? Let me just give it a slightly broader brush stroke. And that is, he obviously, the Steipler was not interested in mentioning, Locke and Hume or any of the others, but we cannot underestimate and understate the importance of what, from Locke and Hume down to Kant and Wittgenstein, all the way down the positivists, postmodernists, who essentially seem to show that our knowledge of anything is highly subjective, and it is shaped by our experience and the sense data and our conditioning. And how can we ever say that we really know something as it really is? And this is really something that we do need to think about, without even going into any of the, perhaps what might be the evidence for this or against it. But actually, Torah has no problem with this concept at all. And this is one of the, let's see how we're able to use this in exploring this perek of Ramchal tonight. And I those of you that weren't in the previous two shiurim, I recommend you to go and listen to them, because I'm building on those, on the concepts that emunah is something. It is a form of spiritual self-awareness because of our makoyer and our shoresh, both in terms of our neshama and the experience of Ma'amad Har Sinai, as a result of which we are ma'aminim, b'nei ma'aminim, and emunah is way beyond anything that seichel can achieve. To some extent, for the reasons that Locke and Hume and Kant and all the others are saying. Because how can we know? How can we know that what we know is the seichel is so much more limited? Chochma be'umois tamin, say Chazal. If somebody tells you that the nations of the world have incredibly wise people and they can understand lots of things, tamin, believe them, that's great, no problem. But Torah be'umois al ta'amin. They don't have Torah. They cannot have Torah. They weren't given the spiritual hardware and thus were not subjected to that experience of Har Sinai, that the Divrei Torah were tkuim belibam, where we connected directly into the mainframe, to the Rabbeinu Shalom, to the point that we knew from that moment on, not as a result of, and this is a really important point. Maybe I should frame this as a question. Maybe I should even frame this as a question. It's an important question. The Kuzari, the so-called Kuzari principle. And I actually recommend Rabbi Dr. David Gottlieb's relatively recent book, Reason to Believe, and not the other reason to believe, but where he restates from a philosophical perspective the idea that you cannot, and this is used and beloved by all Kiruv organizations, that based on two ideas, and it's obviously not for tonight, it's an elaborate concept and it needs to be understood, its constituent parts. The idea that on the one hand, chazaka eino d'meirish sheker lebonov, that because we assume that because we love our children, we will not knowingly peddle a lie. That's sort of one leg, as it were, of the theory, and the other one is the almost the impossibility of smuggling a mass revelation narrative into history, into a collective consciousness. And we're not going to go into that tonight. But that's kind of where he does it very brilliantly. Rabbi Dr. David Gottlieb in his book discusses this, and various blog posts he has with skeptics and atheists, and it's fascinating reading at many different levels. But we want to ask another question. Rav Moshe Shapiro Zechron used to ask the following question, and maybe by way of introduction, I should actually screen share and go through a Ramban, a very important Ramban al HaTorah with you. Perhaps that's appropriate to do at this juncture. So let's hope it works. Here's one I prepared earlier. Here we go. You saved it as a PDF. I hope you should be able to see that. Okay, I am going to minimize it just slightly so it fits into my screen. There we go. So this is the wrong way around. This is the Das Tfunis we'll do later. This is a Ramban. Let me set the scene very briefly, and it's really, really important. I don't know if you remember last week, I requested, if you're really, if you're bored, to read and learn. Just read, just take a translation, whether it's German or English, whatever, whatever, Urdu, whatever language you speak. Take Devarim, Perek Dalet, and Perek Hey, and read them. Read them as the narrative of what Moshe Rabbeinu is telling us. And it's, sometimes we don't see the wood for the trees. Just take it, and in a single sitting, just read through Perek Dalet and Perek Hey. It's incredibly important. It is Moshe Rabbeinu basically recounting the Ma'amad Har Sinai. And as the Maharal always points out, of course, Sefer Devarim is everything from our perspective, from the perspective of the Mekabel, not the Noisein HaTorah, the one who gave it, that's in Yisro, but this is, the Sefer Devarim is from our perspective. What is our take home? What is our take home from Ma'amad Har Sinai? And it becomes abundantly clear as we go through it. The first point I would make is that superficially, it would appear to be somewhat negative. What do I mean by that? And there's a very, very good reason for that. And hopefully tonight, Yimei Hashem, we will still manage to get to why that is. It is, I'll give the game away now because it's really, really important. Ma'amad Har Sinai, the whole spectacle, the awesomeness in its literal sense, the terrifying nature, and that was deliberate. That was deliberate. We are told explicitly that the purpose of Ma'amad Har Sinai was, and I quote, he says it's here on the screen also, Leman tilmedun liyira oisi kol hayomim. The point was that we should capture, bottle, distill, and transmit the sense of awe which accompanied Ma'amad Har Sinai. The fear, the word is fear. Can I ask whoever it is to unmute, if you don't mind, to mute yourselves? Thank you so much. To capture that, Yiras Shamayim. Yiras Shamayim specifically. Sorry, can I please ask whoever it is to mute yourselves? Thank you. It's disturbing. Thank you. Yiras Shamayim is it. I wouldn't say it paralyzes, but it manifests. Yiras Shamayim manifests in prevention of not doing negative, not doing a lois aseh. That's how Yiras Shamayim manifests. Whereas mitzvahs aseh, the positive ones, are an expression, a manifestation of ahava. They are a spur to action, motivation to do. Yiras Shamayim is always as a result of an appreciation of Hashem's magnitude and awesomeness and his authority, and therefore I don't do that which perhaps I would like to do, but it's illegal, immoral, fattening, it's an aveira, whatever. Okay? And therefore the thrust of Perek Dalet and Perek Hey is very much, when I say negative, I mean Moshe Rabbeinu negates. He says what you realized and what you appreciated on Har Sinai is the negation of anything other than a true appreciation of who Hashem is. I'll repeat that because I think maybe that's a way to capture it. The take home from Ma'amad Har Sinai, and we do need to take that home because that then becomes, as we will see shortly, that is the vehicle through which we capture and we transmit the experience, is what? Remember, he says you didn't see any image. Lo re'isem tamuna. And therefore don't serve Avodah Zarah. Do not seek to diminish Hashem's immense essence, wrong word, not essence, by capturing it in some way in a graven or a molten image. You saw no image. Don't serve Avodah Zarah. Lo re'isem kol tamuna. Koil dvarim atem shoymim u'tamuna einchem roim zulasi koil. And remember, don't serve Avodah Zarah, and don't serve, and don't serve, and don't serve. Pentishkach is advarim. Because the point was leman tilmudun liyira. I once heard from Matzio Salomon Shlita in the name of the Gates Rosh Shiva Rebbe Gurevitz Zechon Livracha, that why we say in Mevorchin HaChodesh, we twice, famous question, why in the Mishaberach we say twice we mention Yiras Shamayim. Yiras Shamayim v'Yiras Chet. And once we mention Ahavas Torah v'Yiras Shamayim, and he explained it on the basis of the Ramban we're about to learn in a minute. And he said as follows, if it was mathematical notation, it would be Ahavas, open brackets, Torah v'Yiras Shamayim, close brackets. The Rabbeinu Shalom handed us the most precious, pure, amazing thing there is, that which is closest to his essence, in as much as we can say that, his own Chochmah, the Torah, and he gift wrapped it in barbed wire. He gift wrapped it in thunder and lightning, and we were scared not only to within an inch of our lives, but we lost our lives. Nafshi yotza b'dabroi. The two have to go, they go hand in hand. It's something called Torah v'Yiras Shamayim. It's a package deal. And that we need to bottle and package and take away with us. So that is kind of the background. Now let's learn this Ramban. Says the Ramban, source 2 here on the sheets. We'll go back later, hopefully, to the other the Ramchal. Raki shomelecha, the Pasuk says, guard yourself very much. Don't forget the matters which you saw. They should, lest they be removed from your heart at any point in your lives. You should transmit the experience to your children and your grandchildren. If the day that you stood face to face with the Almighty, with the Creator, with the Beirei Olam, and the whole experience, and say that over, don't forget it. And here the Ramban argues with the Rambam, and he is of the opinion this is one of the 365 mitzvahs leisase. Let's see the way he frames this, and this, I haven't forgotten, is the background to the question that Rav Moshe Shapiro is going to ask about the authenticity of what it is that we are transmitting and our ability to say that we know it to be true. Okay, Let's have a look. So I'm going to miss out the first few lines. This is taking me too long. He first dismisses Rashi's pshat. He doesn't like it for various reasons. I'll go to the bold bit. Okay. So it's three words into this paragraph. Says the Ramban, this posuk, in my opinion, is one of the negative commandments. Hizhir bo ma'od. Hashem warns very much about this. Ki kasher omar. After he has said, don't forget, P.S., note to self, don't forget to do the mitzvahs. Chozar va'omar, he went again, rakani mazhircha, ma'od. It's not enough just to do the mitzvahs and to refrain from doing the aveirus. That's not enough. Rakani mazhircha ma'od, lehi shomer v'lishmer atzmacha ma'od. Very strong, powerful language from the Ramban. Lizker, to remember, me'ayin bo'u elecha hamitzvos. What is the context? What was the gift wrapping? Where did you get these mitzvahs from? Shaloi tishkach ma'amad Har Sinai. Don't forget the spectacle, the experience of Har Sinai. Mikol advarim asher ro'u einecha. Everything that you saw and experienced. Hakolos v'halapidim, the lightning and the thunder and the lightning. Es kvoidov es godloi, Hashem's honor and glory, and the words that you heard him speak from the fire. V'toidia kol hadvarim asher ro'u einecha b'ma'amad hanichbad. Transmit not just the words. It's not enough. If you do not transmit the context, game over. You have to hand that over. Ad olam upirish hatam. Why? Why is it so important? Ki Hashem oso hama'amadahu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did it in such a way. You could always ask the question, if you're giving somebody, if this was a moment of intense love and connection. We say this in davening, both in the morning and in the evening, just before in the bracha before Shema. Let's take the Mariv one just for example. We said tonight, Ahavas Olam Beis Yisrael Amcha Ahavta. Rabbeinu Shalom, you've demonstrated the eternal love that you have for your people. How do I know? Because Torah u'mitzvos chukim u'mishpatim eisanu limadata. Because you took the thing which is most cherished by you, most deeply and intimately identified with who you and what you are, your knowledge and your essence, and you took that and you gave that over to us, whatever that means. That is the demonstration. This is a moment of intense love. Imagine coming to a chuppah, and instead of there being, beautiful music, and there was barbed wires and watchtowers and Doberman pinchers and something doesn't, es klappt nicht, es stimmt nicht, something doesn't fit here. So what is the point? This is what the Ramban is asking. Why does he gift wrap the most incredible gift ever in barbed wire? Upirish hatam ki Hashem oso hamamad hahu kedei shetilmedu liyira oisoi kol hayomim yiras shamayim. Torah is only Torah. What makes it Torah is the connection to the Creator, and therefore that can only be done when it is learned within a context of Eima b'yira b'reses u'b'zeah. As Chazal say, there was a time, when if somebody was impure and he hadn't been to mikveh, he wasn't allowed to learn Torah. The only reason Ezra HaSefer instituted that, the reason that we stopped that was because we only stopped it becoming obligatory because it was a takana she'ein roiv hatzibur yicholim lamed, but it was too much for most people. But certainly b'nei Torah, I think people keep this. Torah is it's Hashem's Torah, it's Kaddish, it's Torah. It has to be, and it is that awe, that appreciation. Otherwise, it's not Torah, then it's just Chachma. And that needs to be handed over. Therefore, do this and don't forget it. He then goes on to say, and we'll leave this bit out. He then goes on to begin to go into this idea that I was telling you before, the so-called sort of Kuzari principle. And this is here's where we want to ask the question. Zehu shenem Hasham, the next paragraph, yes, the beginning of the next paragraph. Zehu she'om Hasham v'gam b'cho yaminu la'olam. Hashem says that this experience, and this really is a separate topic, not so much for tonight, it was the authenticity, it was the authentication, it was a verification mechanism for the truth of Torah and the experience, which when we hand it down, we know that it is true. And here, of course, you get into the big debate, which we're not going to get into tonight, although it's a fascinating one. And this is perhaps one of the most fundamentally different concepts when we talk about the origin and the truth of what it is that we claim. It is because every other religion, by and large, stands and falls on the word of an individual, pretty much, by and large. We'll leave aside the loaves and the fishes for tonight and how that is. We're not going to delve into that, right? But by and large, whoever it was, Yoshki, or Muhammad, or Joseph Brown, or whoever it was, came down and said, God had a word with me, and it's up to you whether you choose to believe them or not believe them. But it all stands, and the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. On the other hand, we claim a mass revelation, and not only we claim mass revelation, but written into it is the fact that in the Torah itself, it says there never will be more mass revelation, Hashem Ha'am, and this is, again, really a separate topic. But more importantly, really, really interestingly, the Torah doesn't focus on it that way. It focuses on Moshe Rabbeinu. Because really, if you actually scratch beneath the surface, and anybody who's ever thought a little bit about this, I remember students always asking me this question, Baruch Hashem, if you think for 2 seconds, you don't buy that basic idea, because Torah tzivalanu Moshe. We don't say Torah tzivalanu Hashem. Why? Because 99.9% of the Torah that we have today, why is that any different, lahavdil, to what Yoshki or anybody else came down and told us? It's the word of an individual. Moshe Rabbeinu comes down and says, you know what, guys? Now today Hashem said, black leather boxes on your arm, and this is the Torah. What did we hear? Maximum we heard, big machlokes rishonim, but the maximum that we heard was 10 commandments. Now, that's another whole story. I mean, that's mom and apple pie. I can subscribe to that. Live a good life. Okay, the Shabbos, the only ritual in there. Leaving that aside, not really tonight's topic. I've noticed I'm saying a lot of things which are not tonight's topic. I'm sorry. But at the end of the day, of course, the Torah stands and falls on the authenticity of Moshe Rabbeinu. And that was the point. As the Rambam, Rabbeinu Bach, and all the others say, the Pasuk says, says Hashem, I am going to speak to you from the thickness of the smoke of the cloud, so that they can eavesdrop on this celestial conversation. Me, Hashem, speaking to you, and the outcome will be, they will know, because they themselves will have heard, as the Rambam writes famously in Perek Ches Yisodei HaTorah, Einenu Ra'inu v'lo zaros, neinu shamanu v'lo yacher. It is we who personally validated, every single Jew, man, woman, and child, personally heard Hashem saying, Moshe, Moshe, leich emer lahem kach v'kach. And we knew, because we personally had experienced it. And that was also part of it. And from that moment on, that's why the belief in the authenticity of the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu is one of the Yud Gimel Ikrim, because without that, we have no Torah. So much so, as even to the point that Meshech Chocham says very famously in his essay Introduction to Shemos, that post Matan Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even have a bechira, he didn't even have free will. Again, a separate subtopic, not for tonight. But let's go on. When we continue, when we hand this over to our children, they will know that this is true, as if they themselves. Now here he says something which, if I understand correctly, I once said this from Rav Moshe Shapiro. I tried to find it again in some of his Sfarim, but I think if there's any mistake here, it's mine. But I would like to, if I'm saying it correctly, there's a depth here which we need to understand. Let's go through this phrase, and I really should have highlighted the last few words here. He says, we will know that this thing is true without any doubt, as if, when we hand it over to our kids, will be as if they will have seen it through the generations. And the Ramban here is not just engaging in some sort of literary device to say to them, that they will visualize, it'll be so vivid as if they were there. Chas v'shalom. The Ramban's not interested in that. But then he goes on to say, why? We will not testify something that is false to our children. We won't give over to them shtuyot. And therefore, And therefore, they won't have any doubt in this. Aval yaminu bevadai, they will totally believe, as we hand this on generation to generation, every subsequent generation will buy it. Yaminu bevadai shero'inu kulanu, we all saw it, beineinu v'chol ma shesiparnu lahem. Question, what's the obvious question? If, besides for the element which, of course, is true and it stands on its own, which is that you'd have to start, let's say a skeptical teenager, I don't know, we've come across quite a few of those in our time, would, or even an adult, would turn around and say, okay, hold on, you know what, I want to look into this a little bit. Whatever. Let me just have a look. Let's look at the different, revelation narratives and the beginning, the origins of these different comparative religions. So it's true. It definitely stands out. Our narrative in and of itself, the idea of mass revelation versus private is a big topic. And that's the topic of the subject of Rabbi Gottlieb's book, as I mentioned. But the other argument, which is what the Ramban is relying on, and this is fascinating. If you look at it, you read it, kipshuta, it doesn't add up. What does he say? He says, because a parent will not peddle a lie to their children. Oh, really? So why does that not stand true for Christians and for Muslims and for Zoroastrians and Baha'is and I don't know what, and everything in between? If the crux of the argument, the Ramban is saying, is because we would not tell a lie to our children, maybe you could say, even as I'm saying it, I'm thinking maybe you could say possibly, true, nobody would consciously or willingly tell a lie to their children, we hope. But examine what that lie is, or what the fact that you're trying to convey is, and you'll see that it is unique. Doesn't sound like it. It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like he's saying that the idea that a person would not knowingly or willingly lie to their children that's the basis of the argument. Well, that doesn't seem to add up, because if that's true, then the same could be said for any parent in any religion. But the pshat is, what Rav Moshe said is as follows. What the Ramban is actually saying is, and this is built on the shir that we gave last week. Go back to the words just before that I emboldened, which was a bit silly of me. Look at this. Yedu shehoyo hadovo emes beloisofik keilu ra'ohu kol hadoros. What he is saying is, remember, Matan Torah was the spectacle, and we don't even need to be Kabbalistic here by saying that all the neshamas were there, although it might help a little bit. That means innately we do have a connection to it. It is inside. We just need to make that connection. You make the connection by giving over to them, not just cold, dry facts, by the way, but the whole spectacle. And when they hear it, because the koilos, everything that was contained within that spectacle, is now packaged up within mitzvahs generally and Torah generally, as Rabbi Aaron Kotler used to say, but specifically in the mitzvah of handing it over. So it's in there. And when you do that and you do it properly, then we're not being made sheker lebonenu, not just because of a psychological concept that a person won't lie to their kids. It's way deeper than that. It's because we're not giving over sheker, we are giving over emes. And they will innately and intuitively, because they are maminim b'nei maminim, they will sense that. And then we will successfully have transmitted everything that was given over them. That's the depth of it. It's very subtle, and I hope I've done it justice. Like we said when we spoke about last week about the zechira. Zechira is through the mitzvah. Remembering is through the mitzvah. It's the trigger. Maybe take it one stage further and then move on a little bit. And that is the... I want to draw a parallel a little bit to something I mentioned. I think I mentioned last week. I can't remember, and that is we know this from science also, that in L'olam Hashem dvarcha nitzav b'shamayim, your word Hashem stands forever in Shamayim. And if you remember, we said that the Dvar Hashem, which was creation itself, the very first one, which the Gemara says, Bereshis nami ma'amarhu, that Bereshis itself is a statement, it's an utterance of absolute reality. It's not a commandment per se, and it parallels, if you remember, we said it parallels Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It is the Asara Ma'amoros morphing into the Aseres Hadibros, and therefore the first one will parallel that. It's a statement of fact. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. The first one was the creation of physical reality and the revelation, that revelation, because that's what Devar means. It is a Dovar. It is the saying, the utterance of Hashem crystallized into physical reality. Then its parallel is Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem, your God. At that moment, when he said that, that is a revelation. So on the one hand, it's a mitzvah of emunah, and hence the philosophical problem the Rishonim ask, but if you accept his existence, there can be no mitzvah. Yes, that's true. But when he said that, as the Gemara says, divrei Torah were instilled and implanted into their hearts. It's the saying of it itself, that statement, it's the statement of reality, it's a revelation. And therefore, just like the echoes, here's the parallel. I haven't seen this anywhere, but I think it's Emes, because it has to parallel it. I think I mentioned the Nobel Prize that was won by Penzias and Wilson in 78, I think it was, for discovering the CMBR, cosmic microwave background radiation, the 3 kilocycle hum, which is it is actually the bass coil, if you like. It is the literally the physical echo of creation itself, so to speak. Pretty much. That means, but then I remember that we have the same thing by Matan Torah. The Pasuk says you had Koil Godol V'lo Yosef. This is a fascinating subtopic. It was a great big voice, V'lo Yosef. Now, normally V'lo Yosef is translated as it did not continue, it did not add on. The Targum says the most interesting thing. The Targum says V'lo Posak. It never stopped. It's the same thing. It's the absolute parallel. So if it never stopped, where is this coil? It's packaged. I can say this from 2 different schools or disciplines. I'll do it the Hasidic way first. The Baal Shem Tov and the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov say that is pshat in the Mishnah in Avos that says that every day a heavenly voice emanates from Har Sinai, from Chorev, and says, Oy lahem labrios me'el boina shel Torah. Woe to creatures from the shame of Torah, that Torah is not being learned and appreciated and connected with. Where is this voice? So the Hasidic Sfarim say it is when a person feels a hisorus within, but where is it from? It's the voice of Har Sinai that's still resonating in 2 places. The Hasidic Sfarim say in our neshama, and Rabbi Aaron Kotler said it's in every daf Gemara. It's in Torah. It's still all within there. And when it is approached and learned with the appropriate awe, the yira leman tilmadun liyira oisi, the Torah v'yiras shamayim, when that is transmitted and given over, then we automatically, every yid, intuitively, instinctively, innately, inherently, be'etzem, we realize and we know, way beyond empiricism and categorical imperatives and any of this other stuff, way beyond any of that. It is elemental, perhaps. And we recognize and we hear the kolos of Har Sinai. It's there. It's in there. And that is what the Ramban is saying. We're not giving over sheker. We are connecting them to that emes that they already have within them. That is Torah. It's not chokhmah. It's emunah. It's way beyond that. And that was meant to be a bit of an introduction that was kind of meant to be the introduction. I'll stop the screen share and we will go back to the Ramchal. I mean, these are important words, I think, in and of themselves. And we're building, as I'm going through it, I'm realizing that we're actually building. This is, I think, the 3rd shir in the series where we're developing these concepts. And now it's going to become very, very important. Let's try and delve into the meat of these 6 pieces of information, so to speak. Okay? So we've done them before, but we'll go through them again, and we'll start looking at them inside in the text as well. The first one is Hashem's existence. Now that one, was the only one, if you remember, we spoke about it, I think, last week, where the Ramchal says, Tzorech sheyamin v'yeda. That is subject both to emunah and das. And we discussed that already, why that is so, that he exists. Then the next 5 pieces of knowledge. It seems he doesn't repeat anymore ya'amin, only yeda. And we try and understand, why is that? So let's try and explain this. This is really important. Let me just very quickly enumerate what they are. They are Hashem's perfection. Well, actually, it's number 2, because his existence is the first one. But we're now going to deal with the other 5. His perfection, his shleimus, mukhrach, the fact that he must exist, the fact that his compelled existence is self-compelled. He is the imperative for his own existence. Pshitusai, this is probably the hardest one of all, in that he is simple in the sense of not constructed of different bits, but he is one integrated essence, whatever. And finally, and the one really we need to spend some time on, we might not manage to get to it tonight, is Yichudai, his oneness and uniqueness. And all of these 5, in all of these 5, the Ramban says, the Ramchal says, Tzorech sheyeda, Tzorech sheyeda. He leaves out emunah. So the experience of Har Sinai, even though it is true that to some extent, the emunah, which we said is deep, innate connection, his existence, that was given to us in Har Sinai. The other, what can we identify a commonality? Is there a common denominator that we can identify in the other 5 that will help us understand why they're put on their own by the Ramchal and how we are to approach them? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. Let me, again, have to go back and do a just very, very brief recap. And I don't know to what extent or to what depth we did this. Whenever, let me just restate for the record, Your Honor, whenever we talk about Hashem, we never, ever, 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 because we can't and we may not refer to his essence, chas v'shalom, ever. It is impossible. Remember, we started this evening, b'mufla mimcha al tidrosh, that which is beyond you, don't even seek. That is actually forbidden. It is impossible. Ki lo yirani ha'adam v'choy. It is absolute. His essence. You need to understand, whenever we use the term, so the Kabbalists always refer in Kabbalah, Hashem is referred to as Aleph Samach, Ein Sof. That's not referring to his essence, Chas v'Shalom. Ein Sof is even within revelation. Remember, we never, ever, ever refer to Hashem as is. We only ever refer to him as a manifestation of his Rotzain, of his desire to, Rotzain, same gematria as Makoir and Shemoi, as he wishes to be known to us. And there are various stages within him as he wishes to be known to us. And there we can go quite high. And even within that, there is Ein Sof, because his Ritzonai HaPoshut, his simple desire to create and bestow, is in and of itself also infinite. And therefore, that's also Ein Sof. And it is within that entire structure that we only ever refer to him. And that's just important to know, because otherwise it's just apikoros. It's just wrong at so many different levels. And that, by the way, if you really have the subtlety of what I just said, this immediately, before we go any further, just negates any potential conversation with an AC Grayling or a Dawkins or a Dennett or a whoever, any of these, Sam Harris, any of the so-called new atheists, because this, if you chap, this which I just said puts us in a whole different universe. You realize what we said? We said HaKadosh Baruch Hu as is totally unknowable, and therefore we never ever, we're not allowed to, and it's impossible, and to refer or even to think. Whenever we refer the entire corpus of Kabbalah and Sisrei HaTorah, the depth of Torah is only ever within how far we can reach in terms of he as he wishes to be known to us. And therefore, I hope you appreciate, therefore, that I don't know if anybody's into any of this stuff, and maybe I shouldn't, whatever. Lawrence Krauss, a universe from nothing, any of this stuff. We're talking a different language, and therefore there's nothing to talk about. We need to understand within ourselves what we're talking about. That's point number one. Having said that, we now can begin, I think, to appreciate. Let's give a common concept which covers all these other five. And here goes. I'll give it to you first, and then we're going to look at a little piece of Das Tvunos, and I think that'll probably be it for tonight, I'm afraid. But I hope we have made some ground. So here goes. The first piece of knowledge is Hashem's existence. We had an incredible encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu at Har Sinai, and we had therefore, and as a result of which there was emunah and das, and that was a connection to Hashem and his existence. The other five that we're going to talk about here are discussions about attributes and qualities of his. And here is where we have a major problem. And I will screen share in a second, and you'll see a problem that has bothered. The truth is, it bothered philosophers also. The Maharal talks about this in many, many places. And that is, whenever we talk about any attribute of Hashem that is positive and defined positively, for example, let's take a very obvious one, because it's actually quite an important one, because it actually underpins everything that he does, and that is Chesed. Right, the first of the spheres. Once we get below Chochmah, Bina, Tvuna, Das, whatever, Chesed. Chesed means HaKadosh Baruch Hu can only give. He's a perfect being. He lacks nothing, and therefore he can only give. Therefore, the common denominator in terms of motivation behind anything and everything that he does is to give, his Chesed. Now, let's just think very, very briefly and very simply for a second. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite. His Chesed, therefore, both in terms of capacity, both in terms of koyach, and in terms of poil, is infinite. Okay, now, how, therefore, are we supposed to have any knowledge, any meaningful knowledge about Hashem's Chesed? Because his Chesed is infinite. And how can we appreciate, let's say we begin to appreciate something about his Chesed, a little bit. How far away are we? How many steps are we away from gaining a true understanding and thus a grasp of an aspect of who he is or what he is within the concept of revelation, of course, as we said, as he wishes to be known to us? The answer is we can't, because however far we get, we are still an infinite number of steps away. So it's a pointless exercise. But that is only true. Now, when I say that's a pointless exercise, I have to be careful what I say, because of course Chazal say we have imitatio Dei, mahu afato. We are meant to emulate him and inculcate within ourselves, or rather activate the Ba'er Ponecha, which was Matan Torah, that you gave us, Ahavas Chesed, because that's our neshama, that's who we are. So of course we're meant to connect to him. And in fact, that's probably one of the main ways we connect him, by imitating his actions and thus getting an understanding of, to some extent, of his Ratzon. But it is impossible in terms of knowledge. If you look at it from a knowledge perspective, which is what he's talking about, we were talking about the six concepts, Tzorich Sheteda, you need to know and know and know. You can't, it's impossible. You'll always be an infinite number of steps away. And this is a problem that many of the Rishonim discuss. So what the Ramchal has done here, and here's the great reveal. All of these five other qualities or attributes or aspects of knowing something about Hashem, brackets, as he wishes to be known to us, is that their very definition is negative. Now, in maths, I know there is such thing as negative infinity, but as far as we're concerned, there is no negative infinity. In other words, once the definition of any quality of his is positive, his chesed, forget it. His chesed is infinite, and I can never get anywhere near it. But if, for example, let's take an example. Let's take the first one. Shleimus. Hashem is sholem. He is whole, perfect. What is perfection? The definition Now, if the definition of perfection was, if it was a positive, now it is a positive quality, but if its definition, if the way to get a handle, a grasp, some level of understanding on his shleimus is only possible through a positive definition, then we're sunk. But what if I tell you that actually you can subscribe 100% to knowing him as being sholem, as being perfect? How? By negating from him any deficiency, any chisaron. A sholem is somebody that has no chisaron. No negative, that's fine, no problem. Mukhrach, he must exist. Nothing else must exist. His existence is non-contingent. I'm going through all of them. He's not toloi. His existence doesn't depend. There's no prior cause. He is a priori. There's nothing else. Well, he's the only one in that. Nothing comes before him. There actually, the very quality is a negative. He is poshut. That means he is not murkav. He's not complex. And the most important one for us, by the way, for reasons that we won't be able to get to tonight, is the last one, which we'll have to spend some time on, and that is Yichudai Hashem Echad. Because do you know what being one means? It means one and not two and not three and not four and not five. One. It's not even what. It's not even the first. He is Echad. The definition of Yichudai is no other. The definition is negative. Unlike the other qualities and attributes which are defined by positive, because then we're sunk. Now let's see this inside. I want to share this with you inside. I've given you the idea. And let us now see, let's see this inside, okay? Here we go back to the first, and let's see how far we can get. Omar HaSeichel, this is Das Tvunos Oislam Adalet. Now, this is, by the way, this is a theme that the Ramchal, it's a motif that the Ramchal revisits, a late motif maybe. It's a motif that he visits and revisits many times in his Sfarim, even in his Kabbalistic writings, in Klach Pischei Chochma towards the beginning, in Adib Amoraim, in many different places. And here, by the way, we are going to get to this in 2040 something at this rate. In Chelek Daled, Perek Daled, here in Das Tvunos, those of you that want to look it up. He then elaborates at great length, but we can't wait till then. We need to at least focus on one of them. We're going to focus on the Yichud Hashem, and he explains this to us. And this is a big, big theme, so much so, arguably, this is the theme of existence. And I do not make this grandiose claim lightly. It's not my claim. And that's what we're all working towards. Giloi Yichudai. V'hoya bayomahu, Moshiach will come, then we'll see. Hashem Echad Ushmai Echad. It's all about that. That's what it's really all about. And what stands in its way is, of course, this other massive topic, the illusion, and I use my words carefully, the illusion of this thing called evil, Ra. This is probably, again, we're not going to go into Christianity, but this is the big problem. It all hinges on Yichudai. And once when we have a sophisticated and deep appreciation and understanding of Yichudai, of what that means, then we'll face the world very differently. We'll actually know what it's all about. But it's defined by a negative. That's the first point. Omar HaSeichel. So here's one of the places he discusses it. Das Tvunos. We'll do a few minutes on this. Das Tvunos Lamed Daled. Omar HaSeichel. Because, of course, as you know, Das Tvunos is in the form of a dialogue, as many of his Sfarim were. Omar HaSeichel, says the Seichel. When we begin to ponder and analyze the structure and order of Hashem's actions, everything he's done from the moment he placed man on earth, and everything that he promised to do to us through his holy prophets, that which becomes abundantly clear to us. It is the essence or the immensity of his uniqueness and oneness. And remember, who's speaking here? This is the Seichel speaking. Right? This is the Seichel speaking. In other words, he's saying the Seichel is capable of appreciating this. Vitiri. And he says, speaking to the Neshama, who is his counterpart in the dialogue here, yes, his interlocutor. V'tiri, he's referring to the neshama in the female, the feminine. V'tiri and see. Shekol sha'ar ma'aloisov shleimusay abal bilti tachlis. All the other attributes and qualities of Hashem's shleimus, which are infinite, habilti balas tachlis, einom mizbarerim etzleinu klal. They are not clear to us at all. She'ein banu koyach lahasig oisom. We lack the faculties, the capacities to appreciate them. Derech Moshel, for example. He doesn't use my Moshel. I'd forgotten this. I used Hashem's Chesed. He uses a different one. Derech Moshel. For example, some Beispiel. Yodanu shehu chacham. We know Hashem is wise. Avalohi sagnu seif chachmasoi. There's no way we can possibly hope to reach a full and total understanding of the full extent and reach of his wisdom. Yodanu shehu yoidea. We know that he knows things. V'lo hisagnu yediosei. But we have no capacity on understanding how he knows things, his epistemology, so to speak. V'alkein omru Chazal, and therefore Chazal say that Kunei Zoyar antu chakim v'lav b'chochma yodia. You Hashem are wise, but not with chochma of knowledge. Antu mavin v'lav b'bina yodia. You are a mavin. You have deep understanding and analysis, v'lav b'bina yodia, but not through that which we know as bina. Given therefore that we are unable to reach and appreciate these qualities, therefore it follows that we are forbidden from reflecting and thinking about them. For the two reasons I said before. It's a pointless exercise. The only thing that can come out of it is a mistake. And therefore, about this is said in the Gemara in Chagiga, "B'mufla mimcha al tidrosh." That, again, that quote, we started the shir with it. "B'mufla mimcha al tidrosh," that which is hidden from you, don't even bother. Okay, now let's go on to the last, quickly. Aval yichudai, but Hashem's yichud. Adarabah, au contraire. Ze mizgaler umizbarer lonu birur gomur. Strong words. Look what we've done. We've shifted from a position of being unable at all, being incapable of appreciating any of Hashem's positive qualities, but we've identified something, his yichudai, that he is one. This becomes clear and clarified to us. Birur gomur, total clarity. V'nimshach lanu mizeh, and it follows therefore. Shaloi dai shehu mizbar lanu. Not only is it clear to us, not only is it capable of being achieved and understood, elo shechayovim anu. We are absolutely obligated. There is an imperative, lahoshiv elibenu hayediah hazois, to make it resonate, to instill it within us. Litkoya oisa bilvavenu beyishuv gomor beli shum pikpuk klal. Very strong words. This needs to be an axiom. It needs to be totally, unquestioningly accepted as an absolute truth. This is something we are capable. Remember, this is the Seichel speaking, not the Neshama. This is not even the interesting. This is not even the Matan Torah experience, apparently. Although we'll see. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu commands us. Actually, again in Devarim Perek Daled, as I said. V'yodato hayoim v'hashevoisa elavavecha. You shall know today, and not just know. Now we understand. V'yodato hayoim is das, and then v'hashevoisa elavavecha. It's beyond that. Ki Hashem hu ha'elokim. In simple English, God is the boss. B'shamayim mimal, b'loretz mitochas, ein oid. There is none other. That's Yichud Hashem, because ein oid. There is none other. Upi elyon meid ba'atzmai, and he goes on. And the reason I want to do these next few lines is because the Ramchal is going to wax lyrical, and he is going to. I want you to appreciate from his language the centrality of this concept in his thought. Really, really important. Upi elyon meid ba'atzmai, the voice of the Almighty, so to speak, testifies himself umaydia. He lets us know, ki kol hanilkat, mikol mesiboisav hagdolos Hashem ishapach be'olamai. The sum total, the focal point, the purpose of all of history, of anything that happens in his world, haloihu giloi yichudoi hagomor hazeh, is the revelation of this concept of his total and absolute uniqueness and oneness. How do I know? And here I'll quickly tell this to you, give you the context, because he uses a pasuk, Shiras Ha'azinu. The Shira at the end of the Torah is the Shira where in a few psukim HaKadosh Baruch Hu encompasses and gives us the bird's eye view of all of history from the beginning to end. That is what Shiras Hazinu is about. That's why it's a shir. The word shir also means share. It's a circle. Yes. Hashem himself at the end of Shiras Hazinu tells us what this is all about. Ke'inyan Omru, he says, Ru'u, see ato now, ki ani anihu. Don't have time tonight to explain why the ani, but okay. Ani anihu, it is I, it is I. Ve'ein elokim mimodi, there is no other power. Me and only me, yichud. Umikro zenemar, says the Ramban, and this pasuk is said, Acha shekol al kol sivav agalgal. This is after Hashem has gone round the whole cycle of history. Hashem, as it were, had to, go round the world through the destiny of history. All of this is included in Hazinu. Hazinu is a sweep through history. He says, you don't need to be a big philosopher. Just read and translate the psukim and you'll see. HaKadosh Baruch Hu seals off the plenary of his vision. Beloshan hazeh, in these words, Ra'u atoki ani anihu, see, it is I, it is I. This is it. This is what it's all about. And here I'm going to do one more. And he goes on and he tells us various other psukim, including Zechariah, V'hoy Hashem l'melech al kol ha'oretz. He is unashamedly, unequivocally telling us the centrality of this concept, Yichud Hashem. Everything focuses on Yichud Hashem. So first of all, why? Because Yichud Hashem is something that we can and must utterly, totally internalize and get and understand and be clear on, because its very definition is a negative. It is the negation of anything else. And here you're going to get a tantalizing glimpse of something really, really interesting. I feel I have to mention it. Go to the next bit that I've put in bold, and with this I think we'll finish. I'm sorry, it's been a bit long. I do apologize. Ukabesh Kosev, the pasuk says, "Leman yedu mi mizrach," says Yeshaya. Beautiful psukim. Leman yedu mi mizrach shemesh mi ma'arava ki efes biladei ani Hashem ve'enoid. So that you shall know from the east and the west that there is nothing other than Hashem. Now here is a pasuk that you are familiar with to some extent, but I bet some of you may not have known the whole pasuk. Yoitzer oir ubayrei choshech. This is within the context of understanding that from the east and the west there is nothing other than Hashem, Yichud Hashem. He is Yoitzer oir ubayrei choshech. Although there are seemingly opposite forces, he created light and he created darkness. Oiseh shalom, the harmonization and putting of the bits together, not ubayrei es hakoil, but ubayrei ra. He created evil. You should know, Ani Hashem oiseh kol eila. It's me, nobody else. There is only one force behind it all. So we say Yotzer Oir Ubayrei Choshech, Oiseh Shalom Ubayrei Es HaKoil. But the pasuk says Oiseh Shalom Ubayrei Ra. And the pasuk is topped and tailed. What is the context? One. And this, as I alluded to before, is really for all of us at some level is the challenge of life, is the realization. Now, to what extent and how, that's going to be a story for another time. And indeed, really almost the whole of Sefer Das Tvunos is built upon the resolution of the paradox of, immanence and transcendence and Bechira and Yediyah and all this other stuff, which is what it ultimately boils down to. But knowing Hashem Elokim Einoid, there is nothing else. Yichud Hashem. Yichud Hashem is there is no other. And you may observe something which looks like Ra. The reason I said before, it's the illusion of Ra. Ra, of course, is also, again, Kabbalah, Ra is the opposite. It's air, if you turn it round. Air is to be awake, is to see things objectively, which we're unable to do at some level. You turn it round, it's not air, it's Ra. But that's only just a remez. And it obviously needs this. We're not even beginning to scratch the surface of that topic. But what I think needs to be appreciated is that topic exists within the context of this idea of one of the important things that we have to know. We must know about Hashem. And spend time on this, and out of all of these 6, as we're going to see. So to summarize very quickly, the last 5, Hashem's perfection, that he must exist, that he does not, his existence is non-contingent on anything else, his simplicity, and the Yichud Hashem all have something in common, which is why they are related to Yediyah and not Emunah, and they are, what is that? That is that they are defined by a negative, and therefore we can have a grasp on them. Their definition is the negation of anything that isn't that, and Yichud Hashem in particular is the one that is going to be the focal point of all of creation in Olam Hazeh. Okay, I hope that wasn't too heavy. I'm sorry it was a bit longer than I intended. Thank you so much for joining me. Be well, everybody. Take care. Have a good night. Kol Tov. Bye.